Hey guys, welcome back to my garage. Today we are sitting in my 2013 NC3 Club. I am actively procrastinating on installing the new stereo, but I have a good reason for that. And that's because I've been working on a 3D printed phone mount. So this is a project that I've been thinking about for quite some time. And I wanted to share with everyone what my thought process was on creating my own version, um, some of the needs that I had, and then we'll talk about some of the previous solutions I had in the car, and then we'll walk you through an installation and then an overview of the two mounting solutions that I'll show you today. So let's get started. Okay, before I kind of get into a long-winded diatribe about why I decided to take on this project, I want to say that the uh, the chapter links are going to be available in the video description. So feel free to skip to the area that you're interested in. But with that being said, I want to go ahead and talk about why I decided to tackle this project. So I used to own an ND1 and an ND2, and there's this company, MX5 Things. They make a lot of interior parts for that platform. And they also support the NC, but not to the degree as the ND. And one of my favorite things was the phone holder. And if you're familiar with the ND, they have detachable cup holders, and there's a slot on the side. And MX5 Things introduced a phone holder that just went into that slot, and it was just a fixed piece that held a phone holder that looked very much like this one. Um, so I really love that and enjoy that as a phone mounting solution on the ND. And anytime I took that car to the track, the phone just stayed in place and never gave me any issues. So I wanted something like that for the NC platform as well. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of solutions that I thought worked quite as well. Some of them were mounted over here on the dash using magnets. Some of them, you basically have to just use suction cups for the windshield or maybe even drill into your dash. Nothing that was clean, that was kind of unobtrusive and out of the way, like the MX5 Things, phone holder for the ND. Luckily, a buddy of mine sold me the IL Motorsports phone mount, and that mounted right here, and I was able to basically take a vent version of the same phone holder and was able to mount it onto that piece. But it wasn't great on the track because anytime I would go into a high-speed corner, my phone would just basically be flung across the room. And I ended up replacing this phone holder with a more sturdy RAM mount. And the RAM mount is much heavier, and the way that I had to orient it, it was a lot more top heavy. So in those high speed corners, instead of it being flung all over the place, the phone mount will just kind of collapse off to the side, and that wasn't also a good solution either. So therefore, I've been on the search for a good solution, and then finally I said, like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it myself. And hopefully I'm going to show you the results of that. So there's going to be two versions. There is one that basically supports a amps mount, and the other one that supports it's going to be more of a ball mount that would support the RAM mounts. Okay, this is the IL Motorsports phone mounting system. It was available for the NC, and I think it is now a discontinued product, or I've seen some websites that make it appear to be available in Germany, but anytime you try to do a checkout, it doesn't seem like it's available. For the most part, this worked really well for me for several years. And then once I started doing track days, I started seeing its weaknesses. So if you can tell, there's a pretty substantial base here. It feels pretty heavy. I'm not really sure about the weight of it, but it supports an amps plate on a ball joint. So the amp specification basically says that um, you know the screws are going to be 30 millimeters apart in one direction and then 38 millimeters apart on the perpendicular direction. And if you follow that specification, it's really easy to design any accessories that will mount up to that plate. Like I said, it worked really well, especially if you're just driving on the street. This works fine. But if you're doing it on a track day, this ball joint right here is a weakness. So at least with this ram mount that I have attached to it. So this is pretty substantial and heavy in and of itself, and then you add the phone on top of it. When you're in a high-speed corner, the ball joint here can basically just give out and just fling your phone in any direction. So there really isn't a good way, or I haven't found a good way for me to tighten this so that there isn't any give to it. And I really wanted to design something that would work well for me on the track. And then I also want to show you guys my previous setup. So this is a lighter phone holder. This is from MX5 Things. I think this is also discontinued. This was originally designed to be a vent mounted holder as well, with just like some aluminum prongs that would attach to the air vent itself, but it wasn't very sturdy. So you can just take off the metal prongs and you see that there's just a screw. So I just quickly whipped up an amp's mouth that I could screw in to the back of it, and then screw into the amps plate here. And for the most part, that worked as well. But in track days, this also would have issues with this ball mounted joint here, and there's really no way for us to tighten it. To address the shortcomings of the IL Motorsports Mount, I went ahead and designed two versions of a phone holder. So it's still going to mount in the same location, the air vent next to the glove box. One of the biggest changes is that it's not going to be as substantial as the other one. It's going to be quite small, and it'll just fit in the recess of the vent itself. And then we have cutouts in here so that you can still get airflow from that vent. So I added these cross members here, and we're going to use those two spots to use zip ties to mount it to the air vent itself, and it'll have two mounting points instead of one. And hopefully that's going to be a lot more sturdy than what we saw in the IL mount. As for the amps plate version, I went ahead and just designed 4 pilot holes in the screw holes. Instead of sizing it to a specific size, I wanted to keep it rather small, and then let people either use a drill to drill it out and use the appropriate size bolts that fits their application. And then we have this other version here that supports the RAM style mounts directly. So one thing I do want to bring up, one of the commenters on the Facebook group that I posted to, is that these RAM style mounts, they can fit pretty snug, but there's still going to be movement up and down no matter how much you tighten this, because the ball itself should have a rubber coating, and if you want something that doesn't move at all. But there are some print lines on the ball itself, so we'll still get some movement up and down, but not left and right, because of the vertical lines here kind of give it enough friction so that they don't move left and right if you tighten it down. So I'm going to test this out. Maybe I'll try to figure out a way to rubberize this. I'm thinking either we put some rubber cement around there and let it dry before we actually mount the RAM mount to it, or connect the RAM mount to it, and hopefully that will give it enough friction from moving up and down. Okay, before we do the installation, we're going to have to prepare our zip ties in order for us to fish it out of the air vent. So what I was doing earlier was bending the zip tie. You want to bend it right around an inch, about 1.5 inches. So I had to actually do 3 folds. So 1 fold here, and then maybe another fold about 15 millimeters above it, and then 1 in the center. So that way you get a nice hook. All right, I want to try to demonstrate how we're going to fish the zip tie through the vent. Once we have it prepared, imagine that this is the air vent itself. We'll fish it through the bottom, and then we'll have to put it in there pretty deep, and then you should hear it come up, and then we can just pull it forward, and then we can fish it all the way out. So we'll need to do, like I said earlier, 1 at the top, or 1 at the bottom, and 2 at the top. Okay, we're going to do the top one first. We'll want to insert it in the second slot right here. And like I said, we just push it through. It's actually angled a little bit. And then we try to pop it out right there. So we'll do that first. And then we'll do our second one. And there's our second one right there. Again, we'll want to go the second from the bottom, not the very bottom. Okay, once we have our zip ties in place, we'll want to go ahead and thread them through the mounting plate itself. So the long end is going to come on the bottom, and then the pointy end is going to be on the one on the top, at least for the top. And then the reverse is true for the top. One thing that we'll need to make sure is that that these don't get all mixed up, the two on the top. I know that from experience. I ended up crossing them. So we'll go ahead and loosely thread this through. Don't tighten it just yet. Just get it in place. And then we'll do the same thing for the bottom down here. Okay, so once everything is kind of loosely threaded through, we'll want to get this aligned, and make sure that you hold this in place, and we'll do the bottom one first. So we'll just pull this one through. Don't tighten it all the way. We're just gonna dry fit it for now, and then we'll do the same thing for the top. So once we tighten it, it's going to have a tendency to move. So that's why you want to have a firm grip on this, and then we'll tighten it down for good. So pull on these as hard as you can. Okay, there we have it. It's actually pretty sturdy. We'll take a set of pliers and we'll just snip these off. I got a set of rusty ass pliers. And there you have it. Let me grab the phone and we'll mount the phone and see how well it works. Okay, here is my RAM mount setup. As you can see, the arm extends out and then it's perpendicular to the connecting arm. So this connecting arm is just vertical, and doing that you really can't articulate the base left or right. And then same thing with the phone holder up top as well. That's also perpendicular to the connecting arm. So that just gives us like maybe a slight 5 to 10 degree angle towards the driver, and I don't think that's enough to get a good line of sight towards the phone. But in terms of the sturdiness, I think it works pretty well. So this might just be something I would use on a track day, and it would probably suffice for that application. But for daily use, I think just having a lack of articulation towards the driver or angle towards the driver would drive me nuts. And then also the it blocks airflow if you're on the passenger seat, so you're kind of shit out of luck there. And then if you're in the driver's seat, I think there's enough of an angle so that the airflow isn't obstructed too much. Here is the amp style plate. I think this turned out pretty good. I've straightened this out so that it's perpendicular to the plate, and let's just see what the default viewing angle would be. So I think the tilt towards the driver is actually quite nice. Even for my short height, I think I might want to tilt it back a little bit. So I don't know if it would be a good solution if you had a fixed mounting solution, but if it's adjustable with a ball mount, like most phones are these days, you should be good to go. There was a commenter on the Facebook group that suggested that I give up on the ball style mount, and I think after looking at this one and the RAM mount, I think he's right. This seems to be a pretty good solution, and it provides a lot more versatility because you can find different mounting solutions that you can attach to the plate that would fit your needs. And I like this a lot, actually. So the next thing I'll have to do is, replace the stereo and then replace the USB-C, or insert a USB-C connection, and then just run the cable to the phone itself. But overall, I think this worked out really well. Okay, for the few that are interested in some of the behind the scenes prototyping choices I had to make, this is the first version. So it had a rather thick base down here. I did that because I wanted to see if there would be any flex. This extension rod here is rather thin, and I thought that maybe the flexing would actually be on the base itself rather than the rod. And just from this, you can see it's pretty sturdy, and I wasn't too afraid that it was going to break off, but you do see a little bit of flex there. And then the other thing too is that the angle is just in parallel to the right side of the mount itself. And when you installed it into the car, you actually wanted to angle it towards the driver so that you get a good line of sight. So the next version, I made it thinner just to see if I can save some material and save some time on the printing. But then the main goal here was just to get the angle better. This one isn't quite right yet, but it's slightly angled towards the driver. And this version was one of the versions I posted on Facebook. And then based on the feedback I got from the group, there was advice to make this extension rod thicker. So, and then the other thing I saw too, that it didn't extend beyond the face of the radio. So I went ahead, I kind of went overboard, and I made the extension wider at the base and then taper to a smaller point up top. And when I dry fitted it on the car, it was obviously too long, so I had to bring it back a little bit. And that's what this version is. But as you can see here, I didn't change the angle of the taper, and I just basically moved the ball down a little bit, and we get a thicker base around the ball. So that actually has some consequences. So when we have the ram mount, the way that I have it installed in the car is that it's going to be perpendicular to the extension arm. And if you want to be able to rotate it left and right, there's just not a lot of angle once this is compressed. There's just not a lot of angle to give you enough articulation to get the line of sight correct. If you have a smaller extension rod, there's going to be a little bit more articulation left and right. So for now, I went ahead and just stuck with this one because I'm not really sure that this ram mounting solution is quite right, because it's rather top heavy. The holder itself is heavy, and then also the base is heavy, and it might not be the right phone holder for my application. So once I kind of got the ball version kind of going, I started working on the amps plate. So this one, what I ended up doing was basically trying to get the angle correct. So when I first did the design, I just kind of made it perpendicular to the extension arm here, and then I kind of just angled it slightly, maybe 5 or 10 degrees towards the user driver. And when it was mounted in the car, it was basically just a vertical face up and down, and that didn't work quite right. So I ended up redesigning it and angling it towards more to the driver, and also angling it up. So that's the version that you actually see mounted in the car. The other issue that I had was the placements of these cross members here. And I guess I didn't do my measurements quite right. And when you end up tightening the zip ties, it kind of moved everything down, and it was off by 3 millimeters. So I had to go and remeasure and redesign the slots. What I ended up doing was moving the arm down a little bit and giving you a little bit more space. And what that kind of allowed me to do too was create more space up the top. That way we can still get airflow coming from this mount, and is not completely blocking the passenger from getting any air. Download files are going to be available in the video description, but I wanted to give you some few tips on printing out your own copy. I went ahead and imported both models into the Prusa slicer. So we'll just reorient these. And the best way for me to print this was to basically lay the right edge of the base onto the bed. So we'll just select one, click on place on face, and we'll select that edge here, and then for the other one, we'll place it there. Once we lay these out and we slice it, well, actually, before we slice it, let's talk about the default settings. So in terms of the print settings, I went ahead and just used the defaults. The only thing I changed is the top contact Z distance, and I set that to 0.1 millimeters. I think the layer height is 0.2 on my printer, and the general rule of thumb is that your Z contact distance should be 50 to 75% of your layer height. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll slice both of these. This actually, if you do both of them, it's going to end up being about 9 hours worth of print time. The ball mount takes a little bit less time. I think that's roughly under 5 hours, and then the amp style one is about 5 hours and 20 minutes or so, from what I recollect. But having said that, if you have any questions about the models themselves, or if you decide to print out your own copy, I would really love to hear feedback from folks. And I'm particularly looking for any issues that you have with the installation or usage. And then if you have any suggestions for improvements, please let me know.